Welcome to the Shepherd's Wallet podcast, financial guidance that speaks pastor. I'm Seth Scott, and I help ministry leaders navigate the unique financial complexities that come with answering God's call. Pastors face one of the most complex financial situations of any profession, yet there's a shocking lack of targeted, useful information available to help them. That's what we're here to change. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by housing allowances, confused by SECA taxes, or frustrated that generic financial advice doesn't address your unique ministry situation, you're in exactly the right place. If you're a parsonage pastor, I bet you felt it, that sinking feeling when friends talk about their home equity while you're building nothing. Today, we're going to transform that burden into your biggest opportunity. Strap in for the perspective shift that could actually make it easier for you to build wealth than your homeowner colleagues. So, if there's a professional class that's been left behind when it comes to financial planning, I'd argue that it's pastors. They're given a set of rules that are completely different from everyone else's. And because their challenges are so niche, they're not mainstream, there's not much out there to help them handle finances their way. And if there's a subset of pastors that are even more acutely in this predicament, I'd actually bring up two. The first are pastors who have opted out of Social Security since they're having to build a retirement safety net completely on their own. And a couple weeks ago, we did an episode just for them. But a very close contender would be pastors who live in a church-owned parsonage, mainly because they miss out on one of the most ubiquitous wealth-building engines in our society, and that's home ownership. And the data is crystal clear on this. When you compare homeowners to renters, and I'd include parsonage pastors in the renter category for these purposes, the disparity in wealth is astounding. In 2022, for instance, the median net worth for a homeowner was around $400,000, and for renters, it was more like $10,000. So, yeah, you heard that right. That's about a 40x disparity. That's real, and that's a bummer. It's no wonder that parsonage pastors, especially, tend to be among the most vulnerable when it comes to retirement readiness because they haven't been building any home equity the whole time. So if you're living in a parsonage, this episode is 100% just for you. And I actually have good news for you today because after I crafted an equity replacement system that's simple, easy to remember, easy to follow, and it's tailored just for parsonage pastors, I actually became a little jealous that I don't live in a parsonage. That's how powerful it is, the math is. And so we'll get into all that in a bit. But for now, I want to acknowledge the psychological weight of not owning a home in an ownership obsessed culture. That's real. You're not crazy for feeling like you're behind, and you're not weak or unfaithful for worrying about what retirement is going to look like for you. You're human, and you're living in a system that constantly tells you that success equals home ownership. And when you add in, the spiritual dimension, wanting to be a good steward, wanting to provide for your family, not wanting to be a burden in retirement, that weight gets even heavier on you. Look, I see you, I hear you, and your concerns are valid. But here's the system that no one has told you about, and it's really based on a mindset shift that I want to give you. You're not really missing out because not owning a home can actually be a blessing to you. I'm going to say that again. Not owning a home can actually be a blessing. This may be a controversial statement, but it's based on a dirty little secret about home ownership that, the math is undeniable. Home ownership is not a great way to build wealth, actually. It just isn't. Now, I'm talking purely mathematically here because, behaviorally, the disparity in wealth between homeowners and renters that we just covered speaks for itself. If home ownership isn't all that great for building wealth, like I just said, then how can it be that homeowners have 40 times more wealth than non-homeowners? And the reason why is because homeowners don't have more wealth because they're smarter or they're more disciplined or anything like that. Homeowners build wealth because the system builds it for them. It's like the system forces them to save their own money in equity in their home. So no, they're not better at building wealth. They're just forced to do it. And they don't have to think about it. And it's the not having to think about it part that makes it happen automatically. And that's what I think is really the main driver between this 40x disparity is you have a class of people that don't have to think about building wealth. It just happens for them in the background. And then you have everybody else. Of course, the people that don't have that luxury of not having to think about it are going to be at a disadvantage. Let's compare this to stocks. Let's do a thought experiment here. So you have owning your home and then you have investing in stocks. They're both technically investments. They both appreciate in value. Stocks happen to appreciate at a much higher rate historically speaking. So why isn't there a huge disparity between people who invest in stocks versus those that invest in homes? Well, part of the reason is that stocks usually require some more choice. That's why retirement planning, just setting it to an automatic payment, is so powerful because it removes that choice from you. And those that do that on a consistent basis and really do set it and forget it tend to build wealth much faster for retirement than those that don't do that. But the things with stocks is that there's really two main barriers that can keep you from building wealth if you own stocks. One is choosing not to invest. If things get tight, if say you take a pay cut or you have extra expenses, say you have medical expenses, you can always choose to pause your investing in your retirement account in order to get more money. And so that option is available to you. And the second thing that makes it difficult for you to build wealth in stocks is the temptation to panic sell when the stock market crashes, right? So we have like another 2008 crisis. So many people bought low because they panicked. They thought it's like, well, I need to get out of stocks because stocks are tanking. I'm watching my dollars go down, 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 down. And those that didn't do anything and just waited it out, they were back at it, like in a few years. They got it all back and they just kept growing. And now look at us, right? We're pretty much at all-time market highs at this point. So popular wisdom is that you just kind of ride out the bottom on these things, don't sell. Well, when you're in a home, neither of those downfalls really apply. It's like you can't choose not to pay your mortgage. You just can't. Otherwise you face foreclosure and you're homeless. So if you have a mortgage, that's numero uno on your priority list. You just make sure to get that paid. And then the second thing, say we do have another 2008 housing crash and house prices drop by 50%. Uh, you're not going to panic sell your house because you live in that house, right? It's doing you, so, you may want to do a short sale or you may want to refinance or you may, do something kind of clever thing to get out from under an upside down, mortgage situation. But you're not just going to panic sell your house, right? No one does that. And so you're kind of locked in to this system where you are disincentivized from doing the unwise things that people who own stocks tend to do. So back to reality here for you as a parsonage pastor. Here's where the mindset shift is so important for you. Because once you do have that mindset shift of just realizing you're not at a disadvantage, you just have to be more intentional. You're not at a disadvantage. You just have to be more intentional. And once you get over that hurdle of just embracing reality, of just accepting your fate and realizing, look, it's just going to take a little bit more work, a little bit more thought, a little more effort, a little more intentionality. Once you get over that and you accept that, then once that's unlocked, you can actually build wealth faster than any system where you're going to be forced to build wealth in a substandard asset like residential real estate, right? So you get to choose what you invest in. A homeowner is forced to continually put their money into real estate, which historically grows at about a 4% rate. You can choose stocks that historically appreciate closer to a 10% rate, if you choose low cost index funds. While they're paying interest and they're paying for repairs and they're paying for insurance, and we're going to go over the math on what that actually does to their appreciation, their net return on that asset in a second. You actually get to invest in something that pays you interest, that pays you dividends, that appreciates faster, and you're earning that from your investment. So you don't need a homeownership system in order to build wealth in a parsonage. You just need a strategy. So let's take a deeper dive into homeownership and look at what this actually means. So again, I said that residential real estate, location matters. Location, location, location are the three biggest words in real estate. But in general, countrywide, residential real estate appreciates at about 4% annually, right? So, for a typical single family home, you're making equivalent of like maybe $1,000 ish a month in appreciation. Just think of it that way. It's like you're making about $1,000 a month on your investment in your home. If your home is around $350,000 or so, that's what the math ends up being. A 4% rate is about $1,000 a month, and that's what you're gaining in equity in your home. Now let's look at this as an investor, because if you were investing in something, you'd actually have to look not just at your gross return, which would be that 4% appreciation. You'd have to look at your net return minus any expenses or anything like that. So, what are your expenses? Well, first of all, we have to take 1% of your house value every year, essentially, and set that aside for repairs. It's usually between 1 and 4% is kind of the place where if you were to look at, you have to save up for a new roof that's going to fail at some point. You need to repair or update the kitchen or anything like that. Those sorts of things tend to be between 1 and 4% of your home's value every year. So that's an expense. You also have, if you have a mortgage, you have, of course, mortgage interest. That's another expense. Mortgages nowadays easily, 5, 6, 7% range. Comparing that to your 4% appreciation with real estate, you're starting to see how that's kind of eroding your returns a little bit. And I wrote a blog post on this, and you could look at some real numbers. But you have homeowners insurance as well. That's maybe $150 a month. You have property insurance as well. In my area, it's about $4,000 a year for property insurance. And you actually run the math on, let's say a $350,000 home, your total expenses end up being about that $1,000 that you're gaining in appreciation. So you're essentially breaking even as an investor, thinking like owning your house as an investment. So, this is why I say that residential real estate is not all it's cracked out to be as an asset on its own. You read Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, he's the one that popularized this idea that your home, your primary residence is actually not an asset because it's not paying you any money. It's not paying you any returns. It's actually taking money from you. It's actually a liability because you are having to pay a mortgage and you are having to pay homeowners insurance and you are having to pay property taxes and you are having to pay for repairs and you are having to pay HOA dues and all these things just to upkeep this house. And then all the appreciation, you're not realizing that now. You're not taking that now. That's all kind of pushed down the road for when you finally sell the thing. But in the meantime, you have to cough up money month after month, year after year in order to keep it going. So that's why owning a home is more of a liability in the short term than it is actually a wealth building engine. It's just that when you have a mortgage and some of your mortgage payment is going back into the house as equity, that's where the wealth building comes from. It's mostly not coming from this 4% appreciation because, again, that's being eroded by all these other expenses that you have that you incur as a homeowner. Most of that equity building is coming from you being forced to essentially save in the bank account that is your house. Anyway, I hope I've made that clear, but that's the system that we're in, where homeowners are incentivized to invest their own money into their own home and have it sit there in something that is, on paper, appreciating at 4%, but that's not even taking into account all of the expenses that it takes just to keep the place, right? So, back to parsonage pastors, what's your system, right? You're not building equity in a home. What can you do? Well, I've developed a system that I call the phantom mortgage. And it's a really simple formula. I love simple stuff. It works well psychologically and mathematically. And it's the power of treating investing like you would a bill like you would a mortgage. And this is where the mindset shift is. Again, think like a home owning pastor. You have a mortgage, you have to pay that mortgage. That's numero uno on your priority list as far as bills to pay. You got to pay that house. If you're not in a mortgage situation and you're looking to invest, investing kind of takes a back seat most cases. So, as a parsonage pastor, if you're going to replace building home equity in your home, we need to have a system that psychologically for you is at the same level of paying your mortgage, right? It has to be at that level of priority. So that's why I call it a phantom mortgage. It's a payment that you make to your future self instead of to a bank. Okay, so how does it actually work? What's the simple system? Here it is. So I want you to go on Zillow or Redfin or something if you're a parsonage pastor, and I want you to find a home in your area that is your dream retirement home, right? Find something that's on the market, say like this, if I could retire in any home, I would like to retire in this home right here. And look at the price of it. Say it's $350,000. What we do is we take that price, we knock three zeros off, right? So you go from 350,000 to 350, and then you double that. So 350 becomes $700 in this case. And that's your phantom mortgage payment. And you pay that to yourself in your investment accounts every month, rain or shine, for a 30-year phantom mortgage, right? Because that's what your homeowner colleagues are doing. They are paying a mortgage, and I'm telling you, it's a lot more than $700 a month, right? And that's the beauty of this system. And this is why I say that it might actually be easier for you once you have that mindset shift to build wealth faster because you're investing in stocks, in assets that appreciate at typically a greater rate historically than real estate does. You actually don't have to invest as much as you would in a typical mortgage, which of course is around, at least $2,000 these days. You add in all the other expenses that we're talking about, you're looking at a total housing burden of more like, $2,500 for a typical home that we've been talking about. I'm just talking about finding $700 and calling that your mortgage. And the math is astounding. And again, you can go to my blog, shepherdswallet.com/blog, and look for the article that I wrote on the phantom mortgage. And you can see it all laid out in black and white, like how the numbers work. You compare your $700 a month payment in stocks and say you put it aggressively into stocks. Say you just put 100% into index funds. Historically, they've grown about 10% a year. Let's just shoot for the moon and just say, we don't have to worry about capital gains taxes. We don't have to worry about risk. We don't have to worry about any of it. We just want to see aspirationally what's possible. Let's say you just go pedal to the metal, 100% in stocks, and you do that for 30 years. You do that $700, your pastor colleague who just, bought their home, they're investing, like 2,000, 2,500 total a month for the same amount of time. After 30 years, what does your homeowner colleague have to show for it? Well, they have a paid off home. If you start with a home at about, $350,000, over that period of time, that 30 years, a 4% appreciation, that home is now worth close to $1 million, perhaps. So that's what they have. They have an asset, a home, that is worth about $1 million. You, with your $700 a month invested in index funds, your portfolio is closer to like maybe 1.3, $1.4 million. And the difference is that while your homeowner colleague continues to have, even after the house is paid off, they're still paying property taxes, they're still paying property insurance, they're still paying for repairs. You now have a portfolio that's actually kicking out dividends and interest and appreciation, and you can actually take income from that investment and live on that if you would like. Now, you could turn around with that $1.3 million portfolio, and especially if you do the system that I'm talking about where you max out your Roth IRA first. Roth IRAs are great because they grow tax-free forever. And so when you get to have that, $1.3 million portfolio in retirement after saving for 30 years, you can turn around and pay cash for your house for your dream house that you found back 30 years ago. Now that house is worth like $1 million, $1.1 million or something. You can liquidate your portfolio, pay taxes on almost none of it, and just buy that house with cash if you wanted to. So that's the power of an approach like this. And again, it's really simple. Just knock off the three zeros, double that, and then that becomes your new mortgage payment. You start by maxing out your Roth IRA. If you're under 50, you can put in $7,000 a year into your Roth IRA, again, assuming that you have the earned income to substantiate it. If you're over 50, you get an extra 1,000. You could put 8,000 in. Anything else, you can just put it into a brokerage account, something like a Schwab or a Fidelity or something like that. And if you wanted to, if you're young, you can put it 100% in stock index funds, which are super cheap. They just follow the market. And, again, you can ride the ups, the downs. You're investing in this for the long haul. So you're not going to panic sell if things get squirrely down the road. You're just going to hold it and you're just going to set it and forget it. Now, if I had an actual client in front of me, and especially if we were either playing a little bit of catch up or we were getting, closer to retirement age, maybe we're closer to middle age, I would have a more balanced portfolio. I'd have some aggressive stocks. Probably most of your aggressive stuff would be in the Roth because we want that to just grow, leverage that tax-free growth as much as we can. The rest of it, I would be kind of more balanced, have maybe a moderate growth, and then maybe have like a conservative fund that's more like, a money market or high yield savings account or something like that. But, and again, you could go to the blog post to see my math on all of this, and you see that it really doesn't make that big of a difference. Like, I think our total portfolio, when I put in a more balanced approach, it went from 1.3 million to, just under a million. It was like 0.97 million or something like that. So we're still in the ballpark of you being able to just pay cash for your dream house in retirement if you wanted to. But again, the point isn't even necessarily just to keep up with your homeowner client or your homeowner colleagues, excuse me. The point is that you're prepared. The point is that you have a system and that you are saving with that same level of intensity that someone who is forced to pay a mortgage would have. Right. So the key is having a mindset shift of just being, this is my mortgage. I have to pay this. No matter what happens, I am not going to foreclose on my future. I'm not going to foreclose on my retirement. I'm not going to be homeless in retirement. This is my new mortgage, and I'm going to do this no matter what. This is going to be my first priority. And if you come to it with that mindset and you really develop that discipline to keep to it, and you have invest roughly kind of what we were talking about, find a home that you want to buy in retirement, knock off the three zeros, double what's left, and then that's your new mortgage. Just sticking to that, set it up automatically with your bank, have these guardrails around so that you can bring the same level of not have to think about it ness that a homeowner would have in just paying their mortgage, and just bring that same situation to saving for yourself. So here's your new identity if you're a parsonage pastor. You're not a homeless pastor, right? You are a strategic wealth builder. While other people are servants to their mortgages, you're completely free. You have complete freedom to decide what your main wealth building engine is going to be in your life. While they're locked into houses that appreciate at 4%, but they have that huge drag of all those other expenses. You are building wealth, and it's not just wealth, it's liquid wealth. I don't mean liquid as in you drink it. I mean liquid as in you can access it. Someone may have been paying their mortgage, for 20 years and they have six figures of equity in their home. Can they write a check with that equity? Well, no, unless they want to go into debt and open up like a line of credit on their home or something like that. It's not liquid. In other words, if they want to access their equity, they have to sell their house, and that's very disruptive, right? You can't just sell your house on a whim in order to, use that money to go on vacation or something like that. People don't do that. You, on the other hand, you are building liquid wealth, right? Which means that you can access it as you need it. You have full control over what you do with it, which is something that homeowners can't say about the home equity that they've been building. So while they're one job loss away from foreclosure, you have flexibility. So don't feel bad for living in a parsonage. I see this as a great opportunity. I see this as an opportunity for you to choose what asset you want to use that's going to grow for you. Um, Now, I want to address something about a parsonage pastor situation, and this is real. Your main risk is displacement risk, right? I mean, technically, you're one board meeting away from really being homeless. If the church decides to go a different direction, or maybe it's a positive thing. Maybe you're taking an opportunity at a new church, and it really is a God ordained thing. But that new church does not provide a parsonage, and you have to find a place to live. Uh, this system has an answer for that too. And the answer is that if you've started this from the beginning of your career, and just like you're buying a starter home and you've been paying on your mortgage, if you had a mortgage, you would have equity in that home that you could leverage to buy a new house at that point. Well, you also have equity. That equity is in your investments, and you can liquidate those investments and convert that into a down payment on your house. Again, the blog post goes into detail on some real numbers here, but let's say you've been doing this phantom mortgage for 10 years, and now there's a change in direction. Again, either you're choosing a new opportunity, or your parish or your church is no longer providing the parsonage, or you lose your position, whatever it is, and now you have to find a home. You're not homeless with no options. You've been building wealth and equity in this investment account, for all this time. And one of the reasons why I suggested maxing your Roth IRA first, yes, it is an IRA, it's a retirement account, and there are early withdrawal penalties. However, Roth IRAs in particular, the money that you put in, so the contributions that you put in, you can take that out for free at any time. Now, if there's any growth in that account over that time, you have to leave the growth in. That would be subject to a 10% early withdrawal penalty if you're younger than 59 and a half, because that's the magic age you can take stuff out of an IRA. But, if you put in, say you put in that $700 a month, and you've been doing that for 20 months, you're now up to what, $14,000. You can pull that $14,000 that you put in right back out. No taxes, no penalties. It's free. And so not only are you saving long term for your future, that also kind of doubles as an emergency fund in case you need to find a house down the road, right? So that is essentially still liquid to you, even though it's in a retirement account, quote unquote. You can still take out the money that you pulled out. So that can be another way for you to save for a potential down payment and have that flexibility in the middle of your career if there are any changes. All right, so action steps for this week. First, I'd like you to calculate your phantom mortgage today. Allow yourself to dream a little bit, right? We're getting out of the mindset of, woe is me, I'm not building home equity, and we're getting excited because this is a really cool opportunity for you. Let's start dreaming, all right? Since we're thinking about retirement and, we really want to tangibilize what we're doing here, we're bringing that level of discipline and vision and excitement to it. I want you to go on Redfin or Zillow today and house shop, right? You're not going to buy a house tomorrow. You're buying a house for retirement. All right. So find yourself a retirement house today and go in and calculate what your phantom mortgage payment is going to be. Again, they're asking, say they're asking $400,000, knock off 3 zeros and double it. Boom, $800. That's your phantom mortgage payment. The second thing I want you to do is open one account, just one, open up a Roth IRA with Fidelity or Schwab or something like that. The next step I want you to do is I want you to just automate one transfer. Start with $50 if you have to, but just set it so that every month, or maybe the day after your paycheck, every 2 weeks or twice a month or however much you get paid, the day after you get paid, have it pull from your bank account and throw it into that Roth IRA. Right? So those are the three things that I want you to do. Extra credit, if you want to share this podcast episode with one parsonage pastor friend of yours so that they can also be empowered and that they can also have a vision for building wealth for their future, then that would be great. And extra credit, why don't you join our free community on Facebook, the Sacred Capital Community. Go to shepherdswallet.com/join. Again, completely free. It's a safe space where pastors and financial professionals can all come together and we all help one another with the particular stewardship journey that pastors have. So remember, here's your mindset shift as a parsonage pastor. Every homeowner pastor had to build wealth in their home because the system forced them to. You get to build wealth because you choose to, and you can choose to do it wisely and aggressively. That is not a disadvantage, that's actually freedom. The question isn't whether you can build wealth in a parsonage. The question is, will you start today? Thank you for joining me on the Shepherd's Wallet podcast. I hope these strategies help you steward your sacred capital with greater confidence and peace. If you found this helpful and would like to go deeper in your stewardship journey, join the Shepherd's Wallet community at shepherdswallet.com/join. You'll get weekly live Q&A sessions, pastor-specific financial tools, and a community of fellow ministry leaders committed to faithful stewardship together. Also, you can pre-order my upcoming book, Shepherding Your Finances. It's the comprehensive guide to everything we talk about on this show, plus implementation worksheets and strategies you won't find anywhere else. Pre-orders are 35% off for a limited time at shepherdingyourfinances.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, you are worthy of double honor, including the honor of proper financial guidance. See you next week.